Looking back, it's actually kind of difficult to figure out how it happened and what were the key events. The last couple of days, I've tried to define some of it. I'm still looking back and trying to figure out, hey, how did this actually happen? Give you some context. I spent 24 years getting up every morning, putting on a uniform, shaving my face, fresh haircut, and going and taking orders from someone. Often taking orders from a lot of people. I had no problem with that. Some initial pushback on my first enlistment. I didn't take to being a Marine right off the bat. For the most part, I spent an entire career being fine, being a part of a large organization, being promoted on a schedule, having a strictly structured salary that depended on my rank, seniority, time in service. When I retired, I fully expected to be a salaryman for the rest of my life. And I didn't see any problem with that. Since I got out of the Marine Corps, I've had 2 full-time jobs, both in decent-sized corporations, both in tech, both in data analytics. I've had bosses, official titles, the whole 9 yards. And none of that ever was unappealing to me. I don't have an inherent or genetic resistance to authority. People will talk about the entrepreneurial spirit like it's some sort of genetic thing, like it's baked into you. Like kids just pop out in the delivery room and say, I can never work for anybody. I can't be part of a corporation. I've got to be my own boss. I don't believe that for a second. I think some of that is nurtured. It is built into you. But even with that, I grew up watching my stepfather start businesses. They weren't terribly successful. Wasn't the most agreeable person. So I don't know that I ever had this incredibly positive view of entrepreneurship from childhood. But if there is an entrepreneurial spark, if there is something genetic that tells you I must be my own boss, I must start my own company, I don't have that. I fully expected when I left the Marine Corps to be until I retired. Retired. All of that changed the day that somebody asked me for advice. And I had no idea it changed. There was not this grand eureka moment when somebody said, how did you do that? Can you give me some tips? I didn't immediately seize upon that. This is a massive inflection point in my life. Someday I will put food on my table and a roof over my head based on telling people how to pass a test or write a resume. But looking back, that's where it started. A couple days ago, I did a video where I called that inflection point number 1. That is where you go from individual contributor, salaryman, salarywoman, cog in the machine, to you're a thought leader. You're starting to advise people. You're coaching people. It may not even feel like it at the time. At the time, I had accomplished one thing, and I don't even remember what it was. If it was just content creation, if I had passed a course or gained a certification, something like that. Somebody asked me for advice and asked me how I did it. At the time, it was flattering to be thought of as an authority in something where I was a new entrant into the field. So I answered. No expectation of compensation or quid pro quo. As a matter of fact, I've commented previously, over time, I've noticed that the people that I help for free, whether out of guilt or whatever, oftentimes kind of ghost you and you never hear from them again. But as time went on, more and more people ask you for advice. You do more and more things. If you're a content creator, you're putting that out in the public sphere. People notice and they want to ask you how you did it. Eventually, when you accomplish a bunch of things, write a good resume, gain a good certification, get a good job, and you talk about it in public, people start looking at you for the path. No longer is it, give me tips and tricks on how to pass this test or gain this certification. It's, tell me how to be like you. Tell me how to get where you are from where I am. That's beyond, let me respond with a thoughtful DM. That's into mentorship. Now you're asking me for coaching. You want a relationship. That is a whole different level. Not everybody's comfortable with that. But then the second inflection point comes when the volume of advice becomes burdensome. And it does. And you start feeling guilty about the people you can't help. And I did. Someday someone offers to pay you. They say, I'll give you $50 for an hour of your time to pick your brain. That's inflection point number 2. Now you are, on some level, trading your time for money. I have some limited level of expertise. I have limited resources as far as time and energy. I am willing to sell those for a price. And at first, when somebody offers you money, if you're like me, you get, it's not offended, but you're put off by it. It's weird. Nobody's ever paid me for an hour of anything before. And initially, if you're like me, you may refuse. And I did. You may be put off by it to the point that, yes, I'm flattered that somebody offered to pay me, but I can't take your money. Let me just help you anyway. Eventually, you start realizing that that's the best way to prioritize the people that you can help. At some point, you probably, it's almost like a lawyer doing pro bono work. You decide life, certain groups, veterans maybe, I'm still going to help for free, but anybody else has got to pay. Because my time is not free. The time that I would give to you, I could give to my family if I'm not selling it. Eventually you make your peace with it. You start selling your time for money. Once you start doing that, the volume will inevitably, if you're any good, start to rise again. It will get to the point where you're not willing to give beyond a certain level of time, even for good money. At some point there, you have to decide what your time is worth. How much time am I willing to sell? And what is the price? For me, I base it off of my salary, off of what I pay other people, like gardeners, because I hate yard work, so I pay someone to mow my lawn, and on what other people in the data sphere were making for selling their time. You have a little bit of imposter syndrome, so I'm not going to sit there and say, yeah, my time is worth the same as what Carly Taylor can sell hers for, or Alex Freeberg, or one of these more well-established experts. But I would still base it off of that to a certain extent. And I think I called that inflection point number 3. Decide what your time is worth. Eventually you get to the point where even that is not enough, and you put a fair price out there, and your sense of fairness dictates, I'm going to charge everybody the same amount for an hour of coaching. You start maybe coming up with products. What do I charge to rewrite a resume in my case? What do I charge for a book that I've written? Working on that, but other people have done it, and I've seen their calculations go into it. At a certain point, you need a system. At this point, I'm not talking about a personal system. I'm talking about systems that you can buy. And that was inflection point number 4. At this point, you're plunking down money that you've earned in order to earn more, in order to make yourself more efficient. What do you buy? You go from the freemium Calendly to the paid Calendly. Why? Because now you can schedule more stuff, you can offer more services, and it's got a pay portal. Now I've got all of my needs taken care of in one-stop shop. Maybe you pay for, you get TopMate, which I've been using. You get a higher end platform like Content Creator 360 or ClickFunnels, Kajabi. At a certain point, you're paying a significant amount of money to make more money. You gotta spend money to make money. And that is inflection point number 4. You have systems in place, you're spending money to make money. At some point it occurs to you This is no longer a paid hobby or a paid favor that I do every once in a while. This is now a business. That's where it ties back to, I didn't plan to make a business. I didn't plan to start my own company. To be honest with you, when I got out of the Marine Corps, the thought of starting my own company was intimidating to me. I had no idea how to do it. Where was I going to find, do I have to pay for a business coach? Do I go to the bank and get their advice? What do I do? I had no idea where to even start. And like I said, I had no desire to do it. The idea of it at that point seemed kind of impossible to me. I knew I didn't want to own franchises and buy a local Bojangles or 7-Eleven. That didn't appeal to me at all. But at the time, I didn't have any ideas. What business could I start? I don't have some grand idea for an invention, or at the time I didn't really have any expertise. That was gained over time. So I consider myself an accidental entrepreneur. This was never some grand plan. This was something that maybe God had it in store for me. And I just took each opportunity as it came, as looking like something good to do. Coming up on a speed bump here. May jostle the camera a little. Try to slow down as much as I can. I've taken to calling myself the accidental entrepreneur because I have found just throughout the course of my life, when I make grand plans, they don't work out. Eisenhower said plans are useless, planning is essential. I have found that to be the case. Another speed bump. That when I conduct planning, I am better for it. I am better organized. I know the things, saying them overtly, what I want to do. Invariably, when I look back at my plan from last year, I'm like, well, that went to hell. Not even close. I didn't do any of that. On some level, I realize that the planning process was useful for me. Getting into starting a business, much like getting into data analytics, like any clueless dope these days, I went to a search engine, I brought up Google and said, how do I start a business in North Carolina? We filed for an LLC because I talked to a business advisor briefly and they said that that was a good thing to do. And Bellamy Consulting was born. At first, we're still a little strange about what to offer. I suppose we could call that inflection point number 5, where you actually legally start a business and you're no longer just... All right, I don't know if I just reconnected there in my driveway, so I popped onto the Wi-Fi. That seems like a good inflection point number 5 is what we're on today. The point at which you register as an actual business. Even at first, it was really a bit aimless. We registered as a business, we filed as an LLC, we did the banking stuff. I was upgrading systems, we were creating content, buying gear. Now I start buying things on the business account, claim them on taxes. That was interesting. That was a big mental step for me. I suppose the next leap forward, the next logical step was, okay, we've got a business. It's legal. It's got all of the trappings. It's got a name. I made a little logo. But the next pivot point, the next inflection was when we started getting a business strategy. I was doing 75 Hard, these challenges. My wife does them too. Part of 75 Hard is reading 10 pages a day, and it cannot be a fiction book. It has to be nonfiction. It is supposed to be something that is self-help or business or career-oriented, something that's going to move you forward professionally in your life. And I did that like any goofball budding businessman. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, And I read Think and Grow Rich. And then I read 0 to 1. And then I read The Lean Startup, a couple of others. Those all got me thinking towards, all right, we've got a business. We're selling a thing, mainly my time. That got me thinking strategically. And I'll get into the sort of the specific points of the strategy because I took something from each of those books. Still reading things, I'm still learning things. I took something from each of those books to make me better and to get me oriented on the things that my business needed to do. But that last pivot point for today was figuring out, what do I want out of this? What do I want this business to do? Making a mission statement, making a strategy. What are we going to offer? What am I going to develop? What products will we sell? At what point am I going to ramp up pricing? What's the best strategy for me personally to make me more of an authority figure that people are going to want to pay more money for, like Alex Freberg or Carly Taylor? And I think that's, we're at 17 minutes here. Went a little long because it's live, but I think that's where we'll cut it off today. So inflection point number 5, what did I say? When you actually register as a business, when you make it legal, now you're committed. Now you've got something on paper, it's paying taxes, it's hired an accountant, all of that. So more and more systems getting put into place. And then that last one is business strategy. What do you want out of this thing? Now it's a real thing. What do you want it to do? Okay. I think that's where we'll end it today. Folks, I got to find the off button on this live thing. Folks, always good to talk. I do like to, on Thursdays, I do Toastmasters, and coming home, I'm full of ideas. I had a few today. Wanted to recap where we've been and then continue the story a little bit forward. So this is the Accidental Entrepreneur, I'm calling it now. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe and like. I've committed to doing daily content, at least for a while here on YouTube. We'll see if it gains an audience. But if not, hey, having content produced and out there in the internetosphere is always a good thing. Folks, Semper Fidelis, and I'll talk to you later.